Hello and welcome back. My name is David Giesica, and I'm part of the CONVERGED User Group Board of Directors. On behalf of the board, thank you for joining for part 2 of our 2-part series, Evolving Your Team. This professional development series was created based on feedback from you, the member. As a reminder, our goal for this series is to share firsthand experiences and best practices our board members have gathered over their careers. Today's session will focus on elevating your team to deliver business impact on your multi-cloud journey. We'll have a great conversation with live Q&A, and we'd love to hear from you. So please use the chat box or the Q&A function or both at any time during the conversation to participate. Without further ado, I'll pass it over to the speakers for introductions and to get the program started.
So David, first of all, thank you very much for that introduction. And now let me just quickly go around the panel. They're going to be hosting this session with me today. My name is Nigel Moulton. I'll be moderating this panel. I was formerly a group CTO at Dell in their infrastructure solutions team, and I'm currently a fractional CTO working with a variety of customers, mostly now in the medium and the enterprise space. And that's my sort of background. Suzanne, if I can just ask you to introduce yourself.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Nigel. I'm Suzanne Pickett. I work for Dell Digital. That's our internal Dell IT shop, and I'm currently the director of our capacity demand planning.
Thank you. And finally, Jonathan Toulon, or JT to his friends.
Hey, Nigel, Jonathan Toulon here. Currently VP of Infrastructure Engineering from McKesson, and also the president of CONVERGED User Group. So always happy to be here. Always happy to be here.
Indeed. Okay. And that's brilliant, because I think in the first one of these talks, we talked about how to sort of help almost evolve yourself into sort of a management or a leadership role. So in the first one of these, that's the sort of angle we took. I think in this one, we're going to assume that you are now in a leadership position. And Suzanne and JT, you both have a huge amount of experience and credibility in this space. So I want to focus this talk very much on the sort of the managerial approach that you take when working with teams that you manage on a day-to-day basis. And those teams will have a number of concerns around changes in the business, around changes in the technology landscape. And it's actually in the technology landscape that I want to talk about to start with, actually, because we're seeing a new operational model appear, right? The combination of bringing AI and ML technologies to sit alongside, if you will, sometimes traditional operations teams. And JT, can I ask you to start with this? If you think about that, what are you sort of doing to prepare your teams for the introductions of these new technologies?
Yeah, so it's a great question because I'm actually doing it right now. So one of the things is when you think about engineering, it's how do I basically create a product or an application to provide some level of function in support of a business, right? Right. And as engineering, we have a responsibility of driving the car at all times. I always look at engineering as the driver of the car. I look at operations as the mechanics. Right. They maintain the car. So in that case, we always need to make sure we understand the direction we're driving in, how often we drive, so we can communicate to the mechanics on what we need to get done to our car, like change our tires, need an oil change, etc. So when you create that mindset, then it's easy to kind of apply a new way of thinking or operating model. To your point, you mentioned AI ops. So AI or ops in general, but AI ops is the direction a lot of people are going, because you want to take away a lot of the noise and utilize the data to create some level of information that you can provide to the team so they can evaluate a problem a lot faster. So being more proactive.
Okay, perfect. And I think, Suzanne, if we take that and almost run an extension of it, which is AI models have the capability to generate huge amounts of data. So how do you sort of start to get your teams to thinking about that they shouldn't be scared of this, that they should embrace this, and that it ultimately has benefits across the business? So if I can ask you to sort of angle the answer around that.
Yeah, you nailed it. That's a very relevant question, Nigel. Yes. My teams deal in a lot of data. They are doing data modeling and data forecasting and ingesting multiple data sources and hundreds of data sources so that we have the real truth of all data. What I tell my team, and what I say this all the time, is all data tells a story. So what is the data telling us, and how do we interpret that? And we also use some AI and ML to help us with that modeling. We don't need to do the fundamentals over and over and over again. There are some if this, then that. Well, JT and I are both kind of, I think, talking too much today because we're fumbling a bit. But there are decisions that can be made. It doesn't require a human. And so we're allowing some of our machine learning to do that. We give it the parameters, we tell it what we're looking for, what we want to look for. That's slightly different than an AI ops model because where we want the systems to tell us when they're not feeling well, right? When they need an oil change. We're really looking for more proactive, predictive type data. But again, all data tells a story. So it just comes down to find the story. And that's how we're really managing that all the data that's coming to us, all the metadata, all the megadata, everything that's coming is, it's telling us something. What does it want to tell us?
Look, we do have this. We have this capability. And I think, and again, sort of starting with you, JT, the next challenge is this can be scary. Right, this can be scary stuff to sort of people who've been in the ops side of the business maybe for many years, who are looking at possibly career development. So there's definitely an angle here around skills gap and bridging that skills gap. And so again, if I can turn JT to you first, how do you sort of address that issue with people that come up to you and have concerns, sometimes genuine concerns, about the sort of use of these technology models in sometimes conjunction with the job that they do?
Right. So people get, I think, because you're driven by I want to say familiarity, right? So as an ops person, you're used to doing your job a certain way. But these tools provide you to look at it in a lot different light, right? I think it allows you to be more optimal, optimizing the environment versus just doing the mundane day in, day out. I go look at a tool, I see there's an issue, blah, blah, blah. But this allows you to really apply some level of engineering into operations, which is, how do I take this error or this issue that I'm seeing, and how do I get rid of it completely? How do I remove it across my entire environment, right? Because now I don't have to spend the time of doing the mundane task, and now I can truly focus on the problem as a whole.
And so, if you think about the educational side of that, are there programs that you put in place? Is there a track that you put in place? How do you actually address the I'm here, but I kind of need to get here because of the way that the technology is progressing?
Right. I think it depends on what you're talking about specifically. We can use cloud as an example because that's prevalent for a lot of people. When you talk about that, you want to reskill and upskill, right? A lot of people are used to doing one thing a certain way. Again, now how do I put you on that path? So I create some type of training curriculum in support of reskilling and upskilling my team in support of the new operating model.
Okay. And so, Suzanne, I'm going to come at it from a slightly different point with you, because in the previous call, you talked about the move to product ownership and product teams within Dell Digital. So I think, again, on the career path as a manager speaking to people in your team now, could you just explain what that product model is and how you think it's beneficial? It's a slight tangent, but I think it's absolutely worth exploring.
Yeah, it's absolutely a journey as well. You don't just flip a switch and say, we're going to move from our traditional operating model into, say, a product operating model. It's really about people, process, and technology. It's all three of those things combined together, not operating in silos. So we've all heard of DevOps. We've probably all heard of agile and lean methodologies. And our software developers have been operating in a product model for quite a few years. So this is not a new thing. But it is very new to infrastructure because we often follow the sun. We have 24/7 operations. And so we have to interpret that software development product operating model into infrastructure. And what does that mean for us? And it might mean we take some liberties, if you will, with how we interpret that. But it also comes back down to the people. So just as JT was saying, we need to find a path. So as we're looking at what are our services? What do we offer as an infrastructure group? Is it creating a LUN? No, it's storage as a service, right? So now we're turning that into what are we delivering? But more importantly, what do our internal customers, because everyone consumes a service, what do they want from us? They want storage as a service. They don't really care about someone provisioning a LUN or a VLAN. They just want the thing they want, or load balancing as another example. So what we're doing is we're, if you will, reinventing how we're delivering IT services. So IT, infrastructure as code or infrastructure as a service. And then we're turning that into, hey, here's how you can go add an IT service into a shopping cart and check it out. And then we're eliminating that churn and that toil, just as JT mentioned. So we're automating where we can. We're developing an API model first. We're there actually, and then we're iterating on that. So every time we eliminate manual toil and churn, that allows our smart people, our engineers, to go focus on more value-added activities. And that's really what it's about. And that's how we get people into that model. It's how we get change, because people start to see the benefit of it.
Okay, perfect. So I think from a conversational standpoint, we've talked about some of the new technologies coming through and how to embrace those and the sort of tracks that you can go on. Suzanne, I think the product model is excellent because it is a different way of thinking, right? And the benefits are sometimes hard to justify when the model is a software model and people aren't necessarily used to that sort of way of thinking, right? I think the final question is, and every organization, regardless of their size or scale, is going through this. They're thinking about cloud. They're thinking about cloud as an operating model. The argument always was just go make it in somebody else's data center. That argument is now, well, actually, let's make it more of a hybrid. In fact, there seems to be a fashion for bringing some stuff back on premise, right? But the operating model is fundamentally different. And so again, Suzanne, if I can start with you this time, if you think about the difference between the cloud operating model and traditional operating models, what are you saying to your folks? What are you saying to your teams in terms of, again, embracing this and how they can sort of evolve their own career to take advantage of some of the opportunities this will bring?
I think for us, especially, it's about an experience. So your cloud operating model is really about how your customers are interacting with you, internal customers, internal developers, business units. How are they consuming your services? And so it's really creating a consistent experience across. So the product operating model really starts with that experience, and then the product lines, and then the individual products underneath it. Everything rolls up into that experience. So the product teams all support that experience. What are we doing to support our overall goals? How are we going to put a database or a container in a shopping cart and let someone check it out on their own within the guidelines and parameters? And that's really what we're working towards.
In your environment as well, JT, you'll be managing cloud providers, right? The big names that we all know, you'll have relationships with multiple of them. So when you look at the McKesson view of the world, it's, again, if you take your traditional sort of operationals teams, guys and girls, we're going to ask you to work in a cloud operating model now. So that has some technology implications. It also has relationship and supplier management implications. So can you talk through maybe how you talk about the differences between just doing this as an on-premise thing and actually then managing a world of suppliers out there, right?
The way I look at it is, it's very difficult for engineers to get out of their comfort zone, but you have to become a business partner to a certain extent, because in order to be successful in cloud is understanding what the business wants to deliver to its customers. And in order to do that, you need to understand the business, right? Because then you want to be able to create what Suzanne stated, and it's those service or as a service, right? You want to create that dinner takeout feel, right? When I show up, I just want to be able to pick my food up. It's the same concept, right? So if you want DR as a service, if you want storage as a service, if you want SAP as a service, right? That's a function that you integrate with the business to understand what they want to deliver. And then you create that service based off of that. And when you do that, it allows you to be a lot more powerful and when it comes to communicating what the business wants and how do you apply it in your side of the world, which is IT.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I think we've been talking for about 12, 15 minutes now. So I think we've had a good conversation and we've covered a lot of ground. And so I'm just going to provide a quick summary. Then we're going to sort of hand back to David and go through a Q&A. So what we talked about was the influx of new technologies, the AI, the ML-based operating models, how you embrace them, and how you get your teams to understand, to Suzanne's point, that every data piece tells a story, and we become storytellers rather than maybe, pure analysts around what the numbers show, right? So people shouldn't be afraid of this. They should embrace the change. Secondly, Suzanne talked a lot about the product model and how it's beneficial to getting to people to own responsibility from start to finish of a as a service thing, right? And you can define what the as a service thing is. but the end point is somebody checks out, they do it on their own, Suzanne, to sort of take your words away and say, becomes a self-service model. So I step back as the operator and I let people drive the machine rather than me always driving the machine. And again, in there sits opportunity and possibility. We just have to use the right language to encourage our teams to embrace it. And then finally, we talked about cloud, and we talked about cloud again from the delivery point of view. Suzanne, I thought your points around that were excellent in terms of how you think about what the end result is for the consumer of the service. And JT, we put a slight twist in it by saying it's not only internal, you have to manage a bunch of suppliers as well, because often in a multi-cloud world, it won't just be you, right? So it's again, how you sort of think about the career path and the changes in job description that will go alongside some of these moves, right? So I think at this point, let's bring our conversation to a halt. It's been fabulous, but I think it's now time to turn the microphone back over to David. So David, back over to you, and let's get you to host the Q&A.
Thank you, speakers. We will now take a brief moment to transition to the live Q&A. Before we do, as a reminder, we'd love to hear from you. So please submit your questions through the Q&A function. And if you'd like to contribute to the discussion, please add your comments to the chat box. All right, welcome. I think we're back and we're live. Looking a little bit different, so thank you for joining us, and let me explain what's going on. For scheduling reasons, we were able to pre-record that session that you just saw, and now we've got the live Q&A. So welcome to the live Q&A. My name's David Giesica, and I'm with the CONVERGED User Group Board of Directors. Joining me today, it looks a little different than the pre-recording because, as you know, in IT, sometimes things happen, and JT had some things pop up, and so did Nigel. I am joined with Matt Wakefield, the Vice President of the CONVERGED User Group. Matt, thanks for joining.
Yeah,
great to have you here.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. And we also have Suzanne Pickett, but Suzanne Pickett is having technical difficulties, so she's going to chime in as audio only. Suzanne, are you there?
Hey, everyone. Yeah, I am. Sorry, everyone. My laptop went through a reboot and firmware update, so I'm having some issues. I apologize for that. We'll get that fixed soon.
Well, thank you so much, Matt and Suzanne. It's great to have you here, and everyone, welcome. It's great to have you here as well. We've got an opportunity to do live Q&A, so please look at the group chat. Use the Q&A function. We'd love to hear your reactions to the conversation that Nigel just hosted, as well as anything that's top of mind right now. We'd love this to be interactive. Before we dive in, and while we're waiting for the questions to come through, I'll explain that since I've got a little bit of I've had shoulder reconstruction since the recording, so I'm one-handed today. And I'll also thank our sponsors for helping make this happen, Dell Technologies, VMware, and Intel. So as we get into it, Matt, you weren't part of the original conversation, but these conversations are not new to you. What's your initial reaction, or what kind of input would you have to piggyback on the conversation we just saw? Or more specifically, what are you going through now with your teams that you think other people might be top of mind?
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, I'm watching the presentation. That shift from a technical, supporting a particular tech stack, to a product ownership structure within an organization. I mean, that's a journey, right? I think lots of organizations are on that path. I know we are. And it's a real challenge in a lot of cases because we haven't historically had our teams think that way. Typically we saw very functionally aligned stacks, around even particular products or particular technologies. Mainly with our engineering teams focused on the technical aspects. So, moving to a product ownership structure means, we have to figure out how to teach our teams, some of those skill sets that weren't inherently part of the job, a few years ago. And I'm talking about things like, financial considerations, the whole approaching a product as a business solution, not really as much of a technology solution, and that that involves some marketing skill sets, some sales skill sets internally. So it's a real shift. I wouldn't say challenge. Some folks definitely are making that transition. I think as you go along, you sort of figure out how to create that approach within your organization. But I think a lot of folks probably are questioning how to, how do I actually start to tackle that?
Yeah, those are great questions. Suzanne, are you out there?
I am here.
So, what are some thoughts that you can share with Matt? Because I think you and JT, we saw the recording there, but you guys had a deeper and a longer warm up conversation and probably a wrap up conversation to that.
Yeah, absolutely. When we talk about transformation, there's really several different kinds. The one we're really talking about is having infrastructure groups kind of transform into a product model, and not a lot of people really know what that means. So I think first and foremost, you've got to kind of understand what your infrastructure products are. Again, kind of going back to that LUN versus storage as a service example, or networking, or a certificate on a domain kind of thing versus security as a service. So it's kind of defining what those are. And then you have to understand what your product teams look like. They should be really small. And sometimes some of us have really large organizations or groups that we work in. Some of us don't. And it really comes down to, that defining those roles. So going back to what Matt just said, if you're in a product ownership role, you own that thing. You're responsible for it. You're accountable for it. You're the face of that product. There's other roles within product teams. There's, product engineers. There's you can even have scrum masters if you're an agile shop. You can play different roles within that. And you can build, you can develop, you can engineer, you can administrate, you can do all those things. In that way, it's not so much different than how we've been doing things. We're just delivering, as JT said, we're delivering a plate of food rather than all the raw ingredients for people to figure out how to assemble together. So I think that's the big difference. And when we talk about people, sometimes we just got to try it. Right? It doesn't always work. We try certain things, and then we say, hey, I want to be a product lead, or I want to be a product owner or product manager. What does that mean, right? And then you find there's a lot of resources out there in the world, everybody, for what those roles mean and how they can act. So you just got to get out there and try.
Matt, when you're looking at the transition from your team, how do you identify folks who are ready for the bump to that next level? Be it, hey, you need to get more economic experience, or, I want to get you in front of the business more so that you understand how to become that owner, that product owner. And then also, how do you take someone who's historically been just in a support role, so to speak, and empower them to become the owner of the product? Do you have some best practices or some things that you can share that have worked for you? Or
I don't know about best practices, but I can share some things that have worked. I think what you observe sometimes is that there are folks that sort of naturally gravitate towards that. And I mean, my approach personally has just been sort of to push more responsibility in some of these areas that are sort of net new for technical folks, and ask, if for an example, if you have a refresh coming up, instead of just allowing that, an engineering team to do the technical part of that, ask them to build out the financial model. Ask them, if you're an organization that does internal chargeback and billing, ask them to work out the internal cost model, and then ask them to present that, to either leadership or a business, whoever your internal customer is, and develop those skill sets. I think sometimes it's informal. Other times, I've had some cases where we suggest training, or put folks in external training opportunities, whether it's IT finance 101, those kind of opportunities, so that people can develop those skill sets that they either didn't get somewhere else or just haven't naturally built over the years. So that's
Yeah,
worked for
Matt.
us. I think it depends on the organization though.
Yeah, I think that's that's legit. We didn't just ask our 1,000-person infrastructure org to suddenly morph into a product operating model. We really started with the basics. We wanted to give everyone the terminology and the vocabulary, so we were all speaking the same language. What is a product? What is a product manager? What's our purpose? What are we supposed to be doing here? And we sent everyone in the entire org through training and boot camp. And then as we've gone on this journey in the last 18 months to 2 years, we have refined that training. So, people started out with the 101 level, and now maybe they're at the 303 level, and understanding, and maturing more in that model. And then we also measure our product teams. We have something that we call our product operating model assessment. So for short, we call it POMA. And POMA, in the beginning, when we measured how everyone was doing, it's also used in software development. Everyone pretty much came back at about 0% maturity. So we started from nothing. We started at the very beginning. And
Hey,
now here we are. Oh yeah, go ahead.
To interject there, just to key in on something, 0% sounds bad. How did you manage the expectations that this is just a measurement and a baseline, not necessarily good or bad, it just is?
Yeah, just like that. It was just a baseline. And honestly, the lower everyone scored the very first time, the better off we were going to be on the next one, because you could only go up. Right? So even if you started at 0% or 4%, I think our highest product team scored at like 7% that first time. And now here we are, and we do this every quarter, by the way. We self assess, and now some of our teams are up in the 85%. Now it took them a couple years to get there, but we saw huge jumps in the first year. We went from that 0 to 4% to 30 to 60. And then that last, those last few percentages have been a little bit harder, because those are the harder, sorry, I can't talk today, harder metrics. But it's really also just to level set internally. How are we doing? How are we doing as a product team? Is it coming together? Is it not coming together? And there's always this thing called a reorg, where product teams change or people move around, and sometimes that sets people back. No, we don't judge anyone on their assessment score. We use it to help, right, and to train and figure out where we need to send resources, and maybe just put a lens on it for a little bit to help people out and get them going. So there's a zero judgment policy going on with those assessments, for sure.
I think that's important. And is the POMA, is that a standard thing so people can Google it and find all sorts of resources for implementing?
I would say just product model maturity assessment. You will probably find some stuff out there. There are multiple dimensions that you can use, and as I mentioned earlier, most of those were built for software development. So if you're a network guy or a storage guy or a compute person or virtualization, you're going to struggle right off the bat to understand that. It's really about translating that into something that makes sense for you.
Yep. Great perspective. Matt, we were talking earlier, and you had a comment that kind of rung to me. I took a note on it. I think you said something about, there's a big question. How do you avoid coding from scratch as you make this transformation? Can you put some context around that and maybe dive deeper into what we were taught, like the content? Can you put some context around that context?
Yeah, I think I was kind of picking up on JT's comments about sort of the shift, as you adopt a DevOps approach to infrastructure, with infrastructure as a code, the shift is an API first approach to managing. I think one of the things we're, personally trying to avoid is creating a lot of that from scratch, right? So, one of our design criteria or selection criteria for new products is not just the back end technology, how good is it, how cost effective. One of the real criteria is how large is the body of knowledge around pre-written pre-written code, if you will, to manage that product using an API, right? If we're evaluating two products, right, one has a really large existing code base of Ansible playbooks, already created to manage that product, to do day two operations, to do provisioning, and we're looking at a different product that doesn't have any of that. Great technology, doesn't have any of that code base. We're starting to really consider that as a major component of an acquisition choice, right? How good is how good is the library of code that exists around it? Because last thing we want to do, we don't want to just sit around creating code from scratch or struggling to go automate common day two operations. We're looking for products that have, it's just as important to have that code base of automation as it is to be a great technical product. I think that was kind of the conversation that we were having, and Suzanne, you guys have probably run into that too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we leverage, our CI/CD pipeline so that code that gets built, first and foremost, it's vetted against best practices, security, code best practices, everything. Right now we're using Jira, but that code is in there and it can be reused and repurposed and built upon, so that anyone can go into that repository and check in, check out code and use it for what they need. So we're not constantly starting from scratch. We're using the code that's been out there. We're researching code that we need. And again, for the most part, a lot of this has been done, or your manufacturers have a lot of this code available. And they have some really good white papers out there too. So when we talk about building an API first strategy so you can work on automation and orchestration, it's really about using what you've got, and then going out and researching what you need. It's all there. And in some cases where it's not, or you're trying to do something special purpose, there's communities like this that can help you. So with that, I'll hand it back with David.
Great. Thanks, Suzanne. Folks, I'm looking at the Q&A, not a lot of open questions there. Group chat, I see some activity, but I don't see any open questions. Before we wrap, I'll give a chance for the audience to throw a couple more questions at us. But Matt, any final words or thoughts as we wait to see if there's more questions coming from the audience?
No, I do think this is an area that we're gonna continue to see a lot of development around, and I'm just really excited to be part of this journey, from tech to product ownership. I think it's an exciting place to be.
Yeah, very cool. Suzanne, final thoughts there?
Yeah, for sure. I think in the beginning, it's a little bit of a struggle and a challenge to shift away from our more traditional model. But as we start to see the benefit of working with a business and not just building something to build it, but actually building something that our business wants and will use, we start to see a much higher, even respect for IT, if you will, in that particular case, because we're playing on their field. And instead of just being the Morlocks in the basement. But I think that it's a journey, right? You have to start somewhere, start small. VM as a service, container as a service, something that's taking a lot of your time but doesn't add a lot of value. And start there and see what that gets you. And from there, you can start building bigger and better.
Yeah, great points. Great points. Find those long levers, the low-hanging fruit, and then work your way up the tree from that. That's great.
Exactly.
Well, thank you, Suzanne, and thank you, Matt. Great to have you here. Great conversation. We're going to wrap up now. I'll thank the sponsors again, Dell Technologies, VMware, and Intel. Thank you for making this possible. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. This is part 2 of our professional development series. It's available on demand as well. So if the panel presented something that got you thinking, let us know, and look forward, pardon me, look to future events with us. If you're going to be in Europe, we've got an in-person meeting at VMware Explore Barcelona coming in early November. And if you're not in Europe, don't fear, we've got another series of webcasts and conversations coming forward. Thank you very much. It's great to have you as part of the Converged User Group. Let us know how we're doing, and you should see a survey as to what you liked about this and what you'd like to see more of. So please, we take those seriously. Fill those out and let us know how we can improve. Much appreciated. Thanks to the panel, Nigel and JT, who aren't here, but we know you're out there. And thanks again, Matt, Vice President of the Converged User Group, and Suzanne Pickett, Director of the Converged User Group, and very key instrumental person at Dell IT. Thank you all.
Thanks.
You, Dave.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate you joining.
Thanks, and take care.
Bye now.